College students/graduates, what's the craziest thing you ever witnessed in your dorm/residence hall? The slip and slide we had on the ground floor was pretty epic, but probably not as epic as this one girl. For some reason, she decided to frick 12 guys on her floor and turn the peephole backwards. Reverse peephole Seinfeld style for everyone to see. I'm fairly confident she didn't graduate. Wow, that's one daring lady. One time, my roommate and I hatched quails in our dorm room. We started out with growing plants, then breeding betta fish. And from there, we kind of escalated to birds. Ordered a cheap incubator and the eggs online, and kept it in the corner of our room without having any real hope that any of them would hatch. 3 of them did. Somehow. And they lived in our dorm room for a whole year without the RA finding out. Helps that they only grow to be almost 3 inches tall. I was not expecting that. That is so random. I was expecting all of these stories to be like weird sexual stories, but hatching quail eggs. Pardon? One of my friend's girlfriends had a roommate that would touch herself almost every night. She said it sounded like someone vigorously stirring macaroni. I remember this story every time I cook macaroni. Blech. I was a sophomore at University of Iowa, on the engineering dorm. The problem was that the main cafeteria of the campus was downstairs, so drunk people would get confused and wander to it even though it was closed, then start having fun on other floors. It was Saturday night and pretty miserable outside, so most people were staying in, when we heard a scream, then a loud crack. When we checked on it, there was nobody in the hallway. There was, however, a large smear of blood along the wall, and the exit sign was broken. One of the guys decided to investigate and found a huge guy in the bathroom, bleeding from the face and drunk. Turns out, he had the brilliant idea of running down the hallway, leaping into the air and headbutting the exit sign. Since a few Hawkeyes have asked. Yes, it was Burge. When my now husband was in college, the thermostat to the whole building was in his room. He discovered he could make the fire alarm go off by simply moving it 1 degree up. So he made the alarm go off at 2 a.m. He did this 3 times. In his same suite, he had a roommate who once asked him to shave his head. My husband did not oblige. The guy left one day, never to return. After a month, the janitorial staff came in with shovels, literally, and shoveled out ungodly amounts of corn from his room. Oi, you dirty boy. Bet the janitor kept that to himself, didn't he? Boarding school here. MP3, phones, etc. were prohibited, but a few people, including me, still had them. One of them was caught and expelled, and all the charging points were covered up. There was one uncovered socket left, but it was 18 feet above ground and was for a big appliance. The solution we came up with was to steal stuff from the physics lab and make a voltage regulator, then make 2 stacks of 3 people standing on top of each other. The top 2 guys worked the wires and got us a connection. 1 stack went up every day for almost a week before we were able to get a wire extender with a socket and get a permanent connection. It is still the craziest/most innovative thing I've ever personally witnessed. Yeah, geez. That's an absolute science lesson and a half. Freshman year, I had a gay roommate. Let's call him Wally. We got along pretty well. We had different social circles, but they overlapped a bit, so we would hang out on occasion. Wally had game. Dude would bring back guys a fair amount and exile me. But that was fine, because I did the same to him, and that's just how it goes, okay? But eventually, he found a boyfriend. I figured that meant more exiling me. But oddly enough, Wally's boyfriend would stay over every now and then, but Wally would never text me to ask if I wouldn't mind bailing for half hour or whatever. Then one night, one fateful night, I awoke to the sound of a creaking bed. And there it was. Wally having butt naughty with his boyfriend. Apparently they'd been banging while I was asleep for months, and being a relatively deep sleeper, I was none the wiser. But there it was, my very own Brookback Mountain. Oh, did I mention that his boyfriend had the same name as me? And when I awoke to find Wally ploughing him, Wally just happened to be moaning his boyfriend's name. My name. I awoke to my roommate moaning my name while he gave his boyfriend D-style. Okay, yes, that would be pretty weird. I feel for you. I would have taken myself out of that situation when I woke up. Two things, same dude. We had a guy whose room was at the end of the hall, so it had a little extra space next to his door. A little alcove. We had tour groups come through our dorm with prospective students and their families. Well, on one of those days, he tore out a bunch of pics from his Playboys and posted them all over his door and on the walls outside his room. He took 3 chairs from the common room and put them outside his room as well. He then had a sign that said, "The Witches and Beaus Waiting Room." A mother went absolutely ballistic when she saw that. He got into deep poo for it too. A few months later, when another tour group came through, our RA, Bill, who was a total butthole, was giving kind of a speech to the high schoolers and their families. So our buddy fell out of his room in just his boxers and his hands tied behind his back with a sock in his mouth. He spit the sock out and started yelling, "Bill, untie me! This isn't funny!" Our RA was humiliated. The parents went absolutely nuts over it. Our buddy was kicked out later that day. A guy I knew used to hook up with girls and then throw their clothes into the hall outside his room, then lock them out of his room, making them get dressed in the hall in front of whomever was around. I think he works for Comcast now, which is pretty fitting. What an actual loser. Like, ugh, you are actual scum. And guys, what's Comcast? Can someone please explain in the comments? One day, I woke up to a sink sitting in the hallway. Like a sink that's built into a countertop or something. Someone must have just ripped a sink out of a countertop from a different building and put it in the hallway, on the 4th floor. My roommate, a girl who lived across the hall, we'll call her Sarah, and myself was sitting in the common room, which is situated right between the 2 dorm rooms, studying/chatting together. We were talking about places we'd travelled or something, when the other girl's roommate comes down the stairs wrapped in a towel, presumably from having taken a shower, and into the common room. As she's walking towards the room, she casually says, "Hey Sarah, I'm going to bed now." Sarah says, "Okay," and continues the conversation she was having with my roommate and I. Her roommate stops in her tracks and repeats, "I'm going to bed now." Sarah gets an embarrassed look on her face, gets up and silently follows her roommate into the room and shuts the door. "Well, okay, Captain Obvious, we know what you two are up to, you dirty dogs." Pull up a chair. It's story time. Across the hall from me lived Ron and Todd. Not their real names, but who cares? They were not a good match. Ron was basically a fat hippie, and Todd was on the football team. The funny thing about this was that it was Todd who drove Ron crazy, not the other way around. Todd basically didn't care about Ron's antics, but Ron couldn't stand sharing his dorm room with a straight edge. So after a few months, Ron cooks up a plan to get Todd out of the room, and this is how it goes down. Based on Todd's story about what actually happened. One night, middle of the night, Todd wakes up. The blinds in the room have been pulled open, and it's light enough to see in the room. Ron is standing in the middle of the room, naked, painting a huge mural on the wall that has the door on it. As Ron moves from area to paint, he skips and quietly sings to himself. Ron also paints himself. Little paint for the wall, little paint for Ron. After 5+ minutes of watching this scene from his bed with growing disbelief and horror, Todd says something, and Ron turns slowly to face Todd, skips over to Todd's bed, kisses Todd fully on the lips, and says, "Go back to sleep, Todd. You're dreaming." Todd is just sleepy enough to find this somewhat convincing, so he rolls over. Also, what else is he going to do? Fight his naked, paint-covered roommate? The next morning, Todd wakes up, and there's no mural anywhere in the room. No paint on the floor, no paint on any of Ron's bedclothes, and Ron is fast asleep in his bed, wearing a t-shirt. Todd wakes Ron up and asks if anything odd was going on in their room last night. Ron replies that he had a chem test that wiped him out, so he just came straight home and went to bed, and had been asleep until Todd woke him up. So now Todd doesn't know what the frick to think. But the best answer appears to be that he had a homoerotic dream about his roommate being a painting satyr. So Todd nopes the frick out of the dorm room and gets reassigned. It made no sense to the rest of us either, until much later when we were having a beer in Ron's room. He asked us if we wanted to see something cool. Sure, we did. So he shut off all the lights and then turned on a lamp hidden near his bed, with a black light. All of a sudden, a massive glowing mural appeared on the wall with the door on it. And all over Ron's sheets and comforter. And Ron just started laughing his full butt off. And that's how Ron got a room to himself. I was an RA. I had 8 residents trap a raccoon and bring it into their dorm to domesticate it. Guess what happens when you let a raccoon in the dorm? It fricks poo up. Guy down the hall was just nasty. Smelled bad, slovenly, but very friendly. He never went to class. You might be thinking, gamer, but nope. He was a day trader. Always told us about his wins/losses for that day. Anyway, this was before mobile devices, and he hardly ever left his computer as a result. Traded in movements of pennies. So he had milk jugs to pee in. He told us proudly about how much time he saved by peeing in milk jugs. I presumed he'd dump them out routinely, but the first time I caught sight of his room, I learned the truth. It was as messy as you'd imagine. But then I saw the jugs. All over his room. The floor, windowsill, computer desk. My memory is hazy by now, but I'd say he had at least 20 one-gallon milk jugs full of pee in his room. To be fair, I couldn't verify that they were all actually full or just waiting in reserve. But at a glance, at least some of them were clearly topped off. And honestly, how many gallons of pee is really acceptable to keep in your room? Okay, wow. Absolute nut job. That would stink in there. That is gross. And that's just so lazy, isn't it? Guy peed on a cookie sheet and let it freeze outside in the winter. He took said frozen sheet of pee and slid it under another guy's door when he wasn't there. All the rooms in the dorm were carpeted. What on earth's a cookie sheet? I actually have no idea. Can someone please tell me? A guy that was wasted and tripping nuts went into the wrong room in the middle of the night and was thrown out of said room, across the hall and through the wall into my old room. Turns out there'd been a giant hole there that was cheaply patched up years ago. Otherwise, there should have been no way he could have gone straight through the wall. It was a cold night, but my roommate and I pushed a dresser up to attempt to cover the hole until someone could fix it. Good times. I was gonna say, geez, who pushed him, Hulk? RA here. Seen some poo. But the worst was when I was a freshman. I had this roommate, Mike. Mike was a D-head. Came from money. Parents bought him a decently nice car at 16. He modified the frick out of it. He thought he was the best and he could do anything he wanted. One night, Mike decides he's going to get very drunk. Maybe take some pills. At some point during the night, for a reason we still don't know, he decided he did not like the plate glass window in the hallway of our dorm. So he dropped his shoulder and ploughed into it. Spiderwebbed the entire thing. At some point later that night, he wanted to talk to some people we knew on a balcony down the hall. Instead of walking down the hall and into their room, he opened a window and headbutted the screen out so he could lean out and yell at them. At some point later in the night, he did cocaine, and I woke up to a bunch of poo duct taped to the wall of our room. Lived in a 21-floor tower. Something like 1,600 students lived in it. 4 guys decided to have a jam session in an elevator and go up and down the building. Had drums, guitars, saxophones, and a vocalist. I think every single floor wanted to murder them. Okay, I get that would be kind of annoying, but that's actually a really good idea. And to be fair, some people could have liked it. You're giving entertainment to the levels, do you know what I mean? My dorm had a secret Santa thing, where your Santa would give you a task to do, and if you completed it, you'd get a gift. In the packed dining hall one night, shortly before Christmas break, a huge, hairy, completely naked man jumps onto a table, tucks his junk between his legs and screams, "Daddy only likes me when I'm a little girl." My roommate was his Santa, and as a reward for completing the task, she gave him a teddy bear wearing overalls. A bunch of guys in my hall collected some masks and dangerous-looking items. Pocket knives mostly. I think someone had a saw for some reason, and pretended to have tied a dude to a chair with a bag over his head. Ketchup for fake blood and everything. They spent half the night on chat roulette with a sign that said, "Boobs or he dies." They didn't actually get any, but people's reactions were pretty great. That and the time one of the engineers dented a wall by firing a custom Nerf gun he'd built down the length of the hall are my only really crazy stories. Wow, you lot have gone to some serious lengths just to see some bits. Jeez. So last winter in Boston, there was about 102 inches of snow over the winter. Being college kids, we proceeded to build an igloo on the roof of our dorm and proceeded to hotbox it. Good times. I lived on the 5th floor of a monstrous 6-story building. One night in February, the fire alarms went off at like 2 a.m. and the building was evacuated. No fire, no nothing. We all went back inside. The next Tuesday, the alarms went off at the same time. This time, someone had taken out the fire extinguishers and thrown them from the top of the stairwells where they exploded when reaching the ground. Obviously, you can't use elevators in a fire situation, and the stairwells were a disaster. It wasn't so much fun running through that. This type of thing then happened every Tuesday night for at least a month. They eventually caught the people when they tried to hit 2 dorms back to back. One of the RAs got fired. I can't remember why. He had a week to move out of his dorm room, and it coincided with Mother's Weekend. Lots of mums visiting campus. He decided to get a keg and invite a bunch of people over as a frick you to his bosses. His room was larger than most, since he was an RA. When they broke up the party, the people stumbling out were frat bros and drunk mums, and a couple of grandmothers. One naked drunk dude jumped through the 1st floor window, as in broke the window with his bare skin. Ouch. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos coming daily.